Hi, my name is Daniel Button, and today I'm going to show you how to make oatmeal bread. Now, this is a really simple recipe, and it's great for beginning bakers because you just put everything into the pot, give it a good stir, put it into a pan, let it rise, put it into a pan, and then off you go. You've got a nice loaf of bread. So, the first thing we're going to do is to make sure that you measure all of your ingredients. Now, flour especially, I recommend that you weigh the flour because you get a much more accurate measure than just dipping the cup into the flour and then leveling it off. So, to start off with, in this bowl, we have 3 cups or 12 and 3/4 ounces of bread flour. And you want to make sure you use bread flour because it has a higher gluten content, and gluten is what makes the bread rise, or this makes the bread holds the bread together while the bread is rising. So 12 and 3/4 ounces of flour. You add 1 cup of whole rolled oats. Now these are not the instant oats, and these are not the quick cooking oats. These are the full bodied oat. Okay. Dump those right into the pot, the mixing bowl. And we're going to add, let's see, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and that's just plain table salt. We have 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, or 1 package of instant yeast. We have 3 tablespoons of molasses. Now you can use either brown sugar with this. You can use honey, but I prefer molasses because it gives the bread a deeper flavor. So you just scrape that in. Notice that you don't have to mix anything up ahead of time. You just put everything right into the bowl. Just make sure you get it all out of there. Okay. We have 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Goes in. And then in this container here, I have 1.25 cups of milk. Now, if you're like our family here, we don't drink a lot of milk in our family. So when I need milk, I usually buy a bunch of these little containers. These are whole milk containers they use for snacks for kids, but they're 8 fluid ounces, and a lot of times the recipe calls for a cup or less of milk. You don't want to have a lot of milk left over in your house. So these are a great little thing to keep around the house. So just FYI. So I've got 1.25 cups of milk here, and I'm just going to dump that in as well. And that's it. Okay. So in order to get this going, we're going to take the dough hook. This is a dough hook. And I'm going to put it on the mixer. And I'm going to lock the mixer. And I'm going to turn this on low just to get this started. Now, you can see that this is coming together nicely. And once it's gotten to this point, you can turn the speed up a little bit. And it will begin to collect all that flour and other ingredients that are down at the bottom of the bowl. Now you might think, ooh, golly, that's awfully wet, and how am I going to be able to do anything with that? As this mixes, gluten is going to be developing, and it's going to pull all of this stuff together, and it will eventually grab onto that dough hook and start beating around the bowl here. That's the kneading process, okay? We're not going to knead this by hand because it's not necessary. But as you can see, it's already collected most of that flour, in fact, all of that flour. And I'm going to turn this a little to you so that you can see it's coming together pretty nicely. Now, at this point, we're going to knead this for 5 to 7 minutes. I'm actually going to turn it up just a little bit. So what's happening now is the dough is collecting itself around the dough hook, meaning that the gluten is developing and it's pulling itself all together. It's also cleaning the bowl. It's pulling all the dough, mixture away from the sides and the bottom of the bowl to collect around the dough hook. And that means that you're getting some good gluten development. You can hear the dough kind of slapping itself against the side of the bowl here. That's the kneading process that you would normally do with your hands. Okay, so I think this dough has gone far enough. So I'm going to shut the machine off, unlock it, and I'm going to take the dough hook off of this machine. Okay. Now, if you look, you can see that the dough has kind of gathered itself around the dough hook and it's cleaned itself away from the bowl, which is really nice. So you just pull the dough off the dough hook. Make sure you get every bit. Okay. Let's put that here. And we're going to take a little bit of flour. I keep a little dish, a little bowl of what's called bench flour, which is just plain all-purpose flour, rather than using bread flour for this, because bread flour is kind of hard to find right now. So put a little flour down there. You don't want to use a lot. Just put a little down there. Okay? Then we're going to take this dough out of this bowl, and I'm going to use one of these. Just go and grab that dough. It's still a little on the sticky side, but that's good. Okay. Make sure you get it all. Okay. Now, put a little flour on top, a little on your hands. You want to just finish kneading it by hand. It only takes a couple of turns. But what you're looking for is you're looking for a nice tight ball with a smooth surface. Well, as smooth as you can get it with bits of oatmeal poking around out of it. But by finishing it off by hand kind of gives you a good feeling about the fact that you're, making dough and making a nice loaf of bread. Gives you some purchase for this. Okay. So once you get it to see how nice and smooth it is, sort of form it into a round, pat it down a little bit. And then we're going to take a bowl. Okay, I've got a nice bowl here. And I've got just a few drops of vegetable oil in this little dish here that I'm going to put into the bowl. Just smear that around with your fingers. Up the sides of the bowl. Okay. You take your dough and you turn it smooth side down and throw it into the bowl. Twist it around a little bit to get some oil on the outside of it. Flip it over and push it down into the bottom. Now what you see there, you're going to look at this and you say, okay, so that's about a third of the way up the side of the bowl. Okay. We're going to put a piece of plastic on that. And we're going to put it in a warm place. Now, my oven happens to have a proofing cycle on it, so I'm going to put it in there because it'll take less time. But you want to put it into a nice warm spot for an hour, hour and a half, even 2 hours. It kind of depends on how warm your house is. But you're going to want this to puff up, and you're going to want to let it rise until it's about double in size, double in bulk. And we'll come back after that's done. Okay, so I've taken the bread out of the proofing drawer and look what we've got here. I mean, that's really puffed up nicely. It's at least 2 times its original volume. So I'm going to take the piece of plastic off of this. And you can hold on to the plastic because we'll use that again. Put that over here. Okay. So, unlike most of the time when you bake bread, you would put some bench flour back down here on the board. We're not going to do that. This bread requires us to use a little bit of oil. So I'm going to just drip a little tiny bit of oil onto the surface here. I'm going to rub that around. You want a lightly oiled surface here. Lightly oiled, and that's really key. Don't use more than just a couple of drops of oil. As you can see, that's really, really spread around nicely, okay? So then we take the bread, and we're just gonna dump the bread out. Ooh, look how light and beautiful that is. Okay, we're gonna dump the bread out, okay? And we wanna shape it into a square, pretty much. You wanna flatten. This is called punching down, okay? And what we're doing is we're getting all those air bubbles that were created in the rising process. We're trying to get those air bubbles out, okay? Because if you've got a lot of air bubbles in there, then you're gonna get little pockets in your loaf of bread when you've seen them in loaves of bread before where things just sort of fall through, or you butter a piece of toast and you get this great big spot that everything falls through. Well, you don't want that. So I've shaped this to about a 6-inch by 4-inch rectangle, okay? And starting up at the top, or my top, or it's closer to you, I'm gonna pull that down and press nice and firmly, okay? And continue to roll that down towards me. Now, the goal here is, initially, is to get this just rolled up into a log, okay? And as you can see, there's a point here where that's about, here's the seam, okay? And we want to just sort of pinch that seam together, okay? Give it a good pinch, all right? Press it back a little bit, and then start rolling. And what you want to do is you want to roll this back and forth a couple of times. Because what you're doing is, again, is you're popping out some of those air bubbles. You want to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles. The other thing is that as we rolled this, the dough got a little bit of oil on it, and the oil prevents the dough from sticking to the dough above it, okay? So by rolling it like this, you're sticking those layers, those rolled layers of dough together, okay? Now, find where the seam is. There it is right there. And you want to have that on the bottom, okay? We've kind of rolled this up. Let's get it again. Make sure the seam is on the bottom, okay? It's about the size of my loaf pan. So now I'm going to take my loaf pan. This is a really good tip. I'm going to coat it with some baking spray, but I'm going to do it in the dishwasher because the dishwasher is dirty. It's got some dirty dishes in it. Forgive me. But if we do it here, all this aerosol is going to fly all over the place. So I'm going to just take this over to my dishwasher, stick the pan in there, and spray it inside there. That way all that aerosol that's flying around isn't going to go into, go all over the place. Okay, so we've got a nicely greased pan. Make sure you put the bread in seam side down and press in there. You should get about half the pan full of dough. This is a 9 by 5 inch loaf pan. These loaf pans come in two sizes, 9 by 5 inch and 8 by 4. 8 by 4 are this, you usually see them, they're from Baker's Secret or something like that. I think that's the brand name. You don't want to use those because the bread won't fit in the pan. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to put that off to the side for a minute, and I'm going to take my piece of plastic that I took off the bowl, and I'm going to reuse it because I'm all about reusing things. Okay. Put this down on this oiled board here, oiled surface, and just press. Get a little bit of oil on that plastic as well, so that when we put it on top of this loaf of bread for its final rise, it's not going to stick, okay? Just loosely cover it. You don't want to cover it tightly because as it rises up, if it's covered too tightly, it's going to restrict the rise, okay? So now you're just going to want to put this someplace where it's nice and warm. I'm going to put this over at my range. And now we wait. The next time I see you, The dough will have been risen, and we're going to get it ready to pop into the oven. Okay, so the bread has risen nicely. Notice, let me just take this plastic off. Notice that the bread has not what's called crusted too high over the pan here. That's important. You don't want it to rise too high because it's going to rise again in the oven. And if it rises too high, just underneath the crust, the bread's going to be all feathery and it won't hold together when you slice it. So make sure you just don't, overprove it at this point. Now this is an optional step, but I like to do it. I'm going to take an egg and take the white of the egg, just the white. I'm going to mix that up a little. Add a pinch of salt. Beat that in. Okay. Now you take this beaten egg and you paint it lightly over the surface of the bread, okay? You don't want to put a lot of this on here because if it seeps down in the side of the bread, the bread will stick to the pan, and boy, will you have a mess on your hand trying to get this bread out. So just easy does it on that, okay? What we're basically doing is making a glue here because we're going to take some oats and sprinkle some oats on there so that people enjoying this bread will know, oh, that's oatmeal bread. And if you were to use something like just water or cooking spray or something like that on top of this in order to stick the oat, they won't stick, okay? So I'm just going to touch them very lightly here, okay? This bread's ready to go in the oven. Remember, a 350 degree oven, and we're going to cook this for about 35 minutes, okay? Okay, so it's been about 40 minutes, closer to 40 minutes, and let's see how our bread looks. Well, I'd say that looks pretty good, but we don't know if it's done yet. It looks done, and I don't think you can hear that. Maybe you can. Sounds hollow. That's kind of a key to what most people say, but I think the best way to test it is by testing its temperature. And what we're looking for is a temperature of 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to pop that into the bread. And that is registering 199, close enough, 199 degrees. So we're going to leave this in the pan. We're going to let it sit here for, 15, 20 minutes. What's going to happen here is the pan's nice and hot, and that's going to, through transfer heat, it's going to continue to cook the crust on the outside, the lower part of the bread. Now, after 15 minutes, you're going to want to make sure you dump this out of the pan and onto a cooling rack. If you leave it in the pan longer than 15 minutes, the moisture from the bread will make the crust soggy, okay? So you want to make sure you get it out of the pan. So we'll take it out of there, and we'll come back when it's ready to slice. Well, our bread's finally cooled, and we're able to slice it open and take a look at what's inside. Use a serrated knife. I think that's a pretty nice piece of bread there. Nice crumb, great smell. It's going to be a great sandwich bread or a great piece of toast in the morning. So if you like the recipe, go to frenchieshouseparty.com and you'll find the recipe on my Facebook page. Okay, thank you.